The smell of roasted garlic and herbs filled the kitchen, wrapping around me like a comforting embrace. I glanced at the clock on the wall, the hands ticking closer to the moment I had been eagerly anticipating. Tonight was our anniversary, a milestone I had marked with a surprise dinner for Mark. As I stirred the creamy sauce simmering on the stove, memories of our early days together danced in my mind. Remember that first date? I muttered to myself, a smile creeping onto my lips. We had gone to that little Italian restaurant downtown, the one with the checkered tablecloths and dim lighting. Mark had charmed me with his wit and easy laughter, the way he made me feel like the only person in the room. Back then it felt like we were unstoppable, two souls intertwined in a world that belonged only to us. "Sarah, are you in here?" Mark called from the living room, snapping me out of my reverie. His voice was warm as always, but there was a hint of distraction that I couldn't quite place. "Just finishing up the dinner," I replied, my heart fluttering with excitement. I wanted everything to be perfect. The table was set with our finest china, candles flickering softly in the dim light. I had even picked up a bottle of his favorite wine, a little indulgence I hoped would bring a spark to our evening. When Mark finally entered the kitchen, his smile was genuine as he took in the scene. "Wow, this looks amazing, babe. You've outdone yourself." He leaned in to give me a quick kiss, but I could feel the warmth of his lips fade as he pulled away almost immediately, his attention diverted by his phone buzzing on the counter. I watched as he picked it up, furrowing his brow at the screen. "Just a message from Jake," he said dismissively, shoving the phone back into his pocket. My heart sank a little at the mention of his best friend. Jake had always been a charismatic presence in our lives, but lately, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was somehow pulling Mark away from me. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to mask my concern with a casual tone. "Yeah, just some plans for the weekend," Mark replied, a hint of annoyance creeping into his voice as he poured himself a glass of wine. "You know how it is." I nodded, but a knot formed in my stomach. I had hoped that tonight would be a chance for us to reconnect, to remind ourselves of the love that had sparked our marriage. Instead, it felt like I was competing with Jake in whatever distraction he was offering. As we sat down to dinner, I tried to engage Mark in conversation. "Can you believe it's been 10 years since we said I do? It feels like just yesterday." I trailed off, watching as he absent-mindedly scrolled through his phone under the table. "Yeah, time flies," he muttered, his eyes glued to the screen. I cleared my throat, frustration bubbling to the surface. "Mark, can you please just put the phone down for a moment? We're celebrating us, remember?" He looked up, surprise flashing across his face. "Sorry, Sarah, I was just distracted," I finished for him. "I get it, but can we focus on each other tonight? Just for a little while." He sighed, setting the phone aside, but I could still see the tension in his posture. The warmth of the evening was slipping through my fingers, and I felt it in the pit of my stomach. Later, as we finished dessert, I excused myself to the kitchen to clear the table. The clatter of plates and utensils echoed in the silence. It was then that I heard a familiar voice coming from the living room, laughter spilling into the air. I peeked around the corner, only to see Mark on the phone with Jake, his laughter mixing with the other man's, filled with inside jokes and easy banter. A wave of unease washed over me. I leaned against the doorframe, my heart heavy in my chest. Why was I standing here, feeling like an intruder in my own home? I tried to shake the feeling, but it clung to me like a shadow, growing darker with every shared laugh. "Yeah, man, she'll never know." Mark chuckled and my heart dropped. What secrets were they sharing that I wasn't privy to? I felt like I was standing on the outside, looking in on a world I once shared with him. I turned away, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. As I piled the dishes in the sink, I couldn't shake the feeling that a storm was brewing just beneath the surface of our seemingly perfect life. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting a warm glow over the cozy cabin that I had rented for our weekend getaway. I had envisioned this trip as a chance to reignite the spark between Mark and me, a way to escape the distractions of our everyday lives and reconnect with each other and our friends. I arranged everything meticulously, hoping that the laughter and camaraderie would drown out the unease that had been creeping into our lives lately. As I set up the living room, I could hear the chatter of my friends arriving. Emily was the first to burst through the door, her infectious energy lighting up the room. "Sarah, this place is adorable," she exclaimed, throwing her arms around me. Her enthusiasm was comforting, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. "Thanks. I thought it would be nice for all of us to unwind together," I said, forcing a smile. "Where's Mark?" "He's parking the car. Jake and Tom are right behind us," she replied, plopping down on the couch. I could see her glancing around, taking in the rustic decor. I hoped she didn't notice my lingering apprehension. Moments later, Mark walked in, laughing with Jake, who was animatedly recounting some inside joke. As I watched them interact, the laughter felt like a wall between Mark and me, and I was left standing on the outside, peering in. "Hey babe, you should have seen Jake try to parallel park. It was like watching a toddler learn to walk." Mark chuckled, slapping Jake's back. I forced a laugh, but inside I felt a twinge of discomfort. "Glad to see you're having fun," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "Let's get started on dinner." I hoped that I could draw Mark away from Jake's magnetic pull, if only for a moment. As Emily and I prepared the meal in the kitchen, I could hear the guys joking and teasing in the other room. "They're so close, it's like they're in their own world," I muttered, slicing tomatoes with more force than necessary. Emily paused, wiping her hands on a towel. "You okay, Sarah? You seem a bit distant." I sighed and leaned against the counter. "I just feel, I don't know, like Mark is slipping away from me. Ever since those texts started coming in from Jake, it's like I'm losing him to their inside jokes." Emily's eyes softened. "Have you talked to him about it? You know he might not even realize how it's affecting you." "I don't want to sound paranoid or needy," I replied, glancing out at the living room where Mark and Jake were laughing again. "But it's hard not to feel excluded." The evening continued with a mix of laughter and tension, and I found myself watching Jake and Mark interact more closely than I was comfortable with. They exchanged playful nudges and whispers, and each time Mark looked at Jake, a part of me felt like it was slowly breaking. Later, as we gathered around the table for dinner, I decided to address the elephant in the room. "So, how's everyone been? Any exciting news?" My voice wavered slightly, but I pressed on. "Just work stuff," Tom said, shrugging. "You know how it is." "Yeah, same here," Jake added, shooting a quick glance at Mark. "Just trying to keep up with the grind." I could feel the weight of their secrets pressing down on me, and it only deepened when Mark leaned over to Jake, whispering something that made them both chuckle. I forced myself to focus on my food, trying not to let the hurt show on my face. After dinner, we moved to the living room for drinks. As I poured myself a glass of wine, I caught Emily's eye. She raised her eyebrows, and I could tell she sensed my discomfort. "Let's step outside for a moment," she suggested, and I nodded, grateful for a moment of reprieve. Once we were outside on the deck, I took a deep breath, the cool air filling my lungs. "I'm really worried about Mark and Jake," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I feel like there's something going on that I don't know about." Emily's expression shifted, and I could see the concern etched on her face. "I've noticed it too, Sarah. The way they look at each other, it's different. Like there's a joke only the two of them understand." My heart raced at her admission. "So, I'm not imagining things?" "No, you're not," she said, her voice steady and reassuring. "But I think you need to talk to Mark. Don't let this fester." As we stood there, I felt a mix of hope and dread. Maybe this getaway would be the catalyst for change, or perhaps it would expose the chasms in our relationships that we had been trying so hard to ignore. The night air was thick with uncertainty, and I knew that whatever lay ahead would test not just my marriage, but the very foundation of our friendship circle. As I stood in the dimly lit living room of the cabin, The weekend away with friends had taken a turn I never anticipated. The laughter and carefree chatter that once filled the space now seemed like a distant memory. My heart raced as I glanced at Mark, who was too engrossed in conversation with Jake. The air felt thick with unspoken words, and I could feel the tension crawling under my skin. It was then that I spotted Mark's phone sitting unattended on the coffee table, a glaring reminder of the secrets I feared were buried within it. Taking a deep breath, I approached the phone, my fingers trembling as I picked it up. I knew I shouldn't invade his privacy, but a gnawing sense of dread compelled me to unlock it. With a few swipes, a message from Rachel lit up the screen. My heart sank as I read her words. "I can't wait to see you tonight. Just us, no one can know." I felt the floor shift beneath me. Was this a joke? I turned, my pulse pounding in my ears, and confronted Mark, who had just walked into the room. "Mark, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos inside me. He looked up, surprise etched on his face. "What's wrong, Sarah? What's going on between you and Rachel?" I demanded, holding out the phone as if it were a damning piece of evidence. "This message. It sounds pretty intimate." Mark's expression shifted, a flicker of annoyance crossing his features. "It's nothing. Just a misunderstanding. Rachel is just being playful. You know how she is. Playful." I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. "This isn't just playful. It's secretive. Why are you downplaying this?" "Because it's not what you think," he snapped back, his patience wearing thin. "You always jump to conclusions. Rachel is harmless." "Harmless?" I echoed, incredulity taking over. "You think sending secret messages is harmless? You're not even trying to deny it." Jake stepped in, sensing the growing argument. Hey, let's all just calm down here," he said, his tone meant to be soothing, but it only added to my agitation. "Maybe it's just a friendly chat. Rachel can be a little flirtatious." I glared at him, feeling the walls closing in. "Flirtatious? This isn't about flirtation, Jake. This is about trust. My trust in both of you." Mark threw his hands up in frustration. "You're making this a bigger deal than it is, Sarah. Just drop it." "I can't just drop it," I shouted, my voice rising. "You're acting like I'm the crazy one for being upset about this." "I'm not acting like you're crazy," he retorted, but I could see the defensiveness in his posture. "I just don't understand why you're choosing to believe the worst of me." Jake shifted uncomfortably, glancing between us. "Maybe we should take a break from this conversation," he suggested, but I could hear the subtle undertone of concern in his voice. I felt the urge to scream more, to throw every accusation I had at them, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I turned away, my heart racing as I made my way to the back porch, desperate for air. The chill of the night hit me, grounding me in the reality of my situation. I leaned against the railing, trying to gather my thoughts, but they were racing faster than I could process. Moments later, I heard footsteps behind me. It was Jake, his presence both comforting and unsettling. "Sarah," he began, his voice low and cautious. "I didn't mean to intrude, but I'm here if you want to talk." "Talk?" I scoffed, my anger bubbling just beneath the surface. "What's left to talk about? I thought you were my friend. I thought I could trust you and Mark." "I swear it's not what it seems," Jake said earnestly, stepping closer. "Mark cares about you. He really does. This whole thing with Rachel is just complicated." "Complicated?" I echoed, feeling the sting of tears threatening to spill. What does that even mean? I'm standing here feeling like my entire world is falling apart, and you're telling me it's complicated. "Look, I just think there are things you don't understand," he said, his eyes searching mine. "But if you let me, I can help you figure it out." Before I could respond, I heard a muffled sound from inside the cabin. My heart raced again as I strained to listen. It was Mark's voice, and there was something off about it, a tone I hadn't heard before. I edged closer to the door, my heart pounding, and suddenly I caught snippets of a conversation that made my breath hitch. "Just keep it a secret," Mark said, his words laced with urgency. "Sarah can't know." I froze, the weight of betrayal crashing over me like a wave. the darkness of their secret wrapped around me, suffocating and terrifying. I turned to Jake, my eyes wide with fear. What are they keeping from me? Jake's expression turned serious, the playful facade dropping. Sarah, But I couldn't hear him anymore. The world blurred around me as I stepped back, my mind racing with questions that screamed for answers. What was happening? What had I missed? I felt utterly lost, standing on the precipice of a truth that could shatter everything I thought I knew. The weight of uncertainty pressed down on my chest as I rummaged through Mark's belongings in our shared bedroom. My heart raced, each rustle of fabric and click of a drawer echoing in the silence like a drumroll heralding some inevitable disaster. I had to know the truth, what lay behind the laughter and the secrets that had woven themselves into the fabric of our lives. I pulled open the drawer of Mark's nightstand, its contents spilling out. Old receipts, a few crumpled notes, and beneath it all his phone. It lay there, innocently, but I felt it was anything but. With trembling hands I hesitated. Was I really about to invade his privacy like this? But the thought of him laughing with Jake and Rachel at that bar fanned the flames of my desperation. I had to uncover the truth. I powered on the phone, my fingers moving quickly, scanning through messages, pictures, anything that might reveal his betrayal. After a few minutes of fruitless searching, I found a thread between Mark and Jake. My heart sank as I read their exchanges, filled with inside jokes and references to time spent together that I never knew about. But it was the last message that made my stomach drop. Can't wait for tonight. Just keep Sarah out of it. What were they planning? My mind raced and anger surged through me. I was ready to confront Mark, to demand answers, but a part of me knew I needed more than just a confrontation. I needed clarity from someone who could offer insight into the dynamics of their friendship. Tom. He might know something. I arranged to meet him at a nearby cafe the next day, each tick of the clock amplifying my anxiety. As I took a seat, I fidgeted with my napkin, stealing glances at the door, waiting for him to arrive. When he finally walked in, his expression was guarded, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Sarah, he said, sliding into the seat across from me. What's going on? Tom, I need to know the truth about Mark and Jake. There's something happening, something that feels off. I blurted, unable to mask the urgency in my voice. He hesitated, his brow furrowing as he looked around the cafe, as if ensuring no one was listening. It's complicated, Sarah. You have to understand. Complicated? You mean deceitful? I interrupted, frustration bubbling to the surface. I've seen messages on Mark's phone. I know they're hiding something from me. What is it? Tom took a deep breath, glancing down at the table as if the answer was written there. It's not just about you and Mark. It's about all of us. There are things you don't know. Then tell me. I urged, leaning closer. I can't keep living in the dark like this. He finally met my gaze, and the weight of his words hung in the air. Let's just say Mark and Jake have been involved with Rachel in a way that crosses lines. It's not just friendship, Sarah. They've been keeping secrets, and it's not easy to explain. My heart raced. What do you mean involved? Are they in some kind of scheme? Are they cheating on me with her? Tom shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I can't say for sure, but you need to be careful. It's a tangled web. I wish I could help more, but I'm not sure how deep this goes. I felt my world crumbling, the betrayal morphing into a dark, oppressive force pressing down on me. I need to know more, Tom. I can't just sit back and let this happen. As I left the cafe, my mind was a whirlwind of confusion and anger. I felt like a detective in a crime novel, but the stakes were far too personal. I needed more proof. I needed to see for myself what Mark was up to. That evening, I made a decision that filled me with both dread and determination. I would follow him. I had to know where he was going and with whom. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I waited for Mark to leave the house, my heart pounding in my chest like a war drum. When he finally stepped out, I slipped into my car, keeping a safe distance as I trailed him through the city streets. Each turn he made felt like a step deeper into a dark abyss, my gut twisting with every passing moment. Finally, he parked outside a bar, a place I recognized from the nights he spent with his friends. I hesitated, my breath catching in my throat, but the sight of him laughing with Jake and Rachel ignited a fire of fury within me. I felt invisible, an outsider watching a scene unfold that I was supposed to be a part of. The way they leaned into each other, the way their laughter filled the air. It was as if I didn't exist. With my heart racing and fists clenched, I knew I couldn't ignore this any longer. I had to confront him, to demand answers for the betrayal that was unraveling before my eyes. My world was about to shift once again, and I was ready to unleash the storm. The moment I stepped through the front door, my heart raced with an anxiety that felt all too familiar. The air was heavy with the scent of something burnt, likely the remains of my once beloved dinner dishes, now neglected on the counter. I had spent hours preparing a meal that was meant to be a symbol of our love, and yet here I was drowning in a sea of doubt and betrayal. Mark was sitting on the couch, his eyes glued to his phone, laughter spilling from his lips as he shared some joke with Jake. "Mark," I said, my voice trembling despite my efforts to sound calm. "We need to talk." He glanced up, surprise etched across his face, but quickly dismissed my tone. "Can it wait? I'm in the middle of something." "No, it can't wait," I insisted, clenching my fists at my sides. "I saw you at the bar last night. You were having a great time with Jake and Rachel." Mark's expression shifted, but not in the way I had hoped. Instead, there was a flicker of annoyance, as if my concerns were an inconvenience. "Sarah, it was just a few drinks with friends. You know how it is. Just friends," I echoed, incredulity spilling from my lips. "You were laughing with Rachel like it was some kind of private joke. What am I supposed to think?" He sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. "You're overreacting. We were just blowing off steam. You're reading too much into it." "Reading too much into it?" I felt my voice rising, the hurt boiling over. "This isn't just about last night. It's about how you've been acting for weeks. You're distant, and you find comfort in your friends instead of me. What's going on, Mark?" He leaned back against the couch, crossing his arms defensively. "Nothing is going on. Why can't you trust me?" "Because trust is built on transparency." I shot back, my heart pounding in my chest. "And you're hiding something. I can feel it." He rolled his eyes, a gesture that stung more than any words could. "You're being paranoid, Sarah. I'm starting to think you're the one hiding something." My breath hitched at his words. "How can you say that? I've done nothing but stand by you while you've been off gallivanting with your friends. I'm the one who feels betrayed." The silence that followed was deafening, and for a moment, I thought he might finally understand. But instead, Mark stood up and walked past me, heading toward the kitchen. "I need a drink." I felt the ground beneath me crumble. My heart ached, not only from the sense of betrayal but from the realization that the man I married was slipping further away. I needed someone to talk to, someone I could trust. I picked up my phone and texted Emily. "Can we talk? I need you." Her reply came almost instantly. "Of course. Come over." When I arrived at Emily's house, her comforting presence should have eased my mind, but the weight of my heartache was too heavy. I sank into the couch, looking for solace in her understanding gaze. "Sarah, you look awful. What happened?" she asked gently. "I confronted Mark about last night," I admitted, my voice shaky. "He brushed me off like it was nothing. Emily, I'm scared. I feel like I'm losing him." Emily shifted uncomfortably, her expression clouded with something that felt like hesitation. "I've noticed he's been a bit distant lately," she said finally, choosing her words carefully. "But I really don't think he would." "Would what?" I interrupted, my frustration boiling over. "Would cheat on me? Because it feels like he's already doing that with his friends. I just need you to be honest with me." Her eyes dropped to the floor, a frown forming on her lips. "I don't know everything, but I think you should watch out for Rachel. She's new to your circle, and I've heard things." "Things? What kind of things?" My heart raced as I leaned closer, desperate for answers. I don't want to say anything without proof." But be careful, Sarah. Sometimes people don't show their true colors right away, she warned, her voice barely above a whisper. I left her house that night feeling more alone than ever. My gut twisted with apprehension, and just when I thought I had reached the bottom of this nightmare, a notification on my phone caught my eye. An anonymous message appeared on the screen. You don't know the half of it. A chill ran down my spine. What did that mean? What was I missing? The weight of betrayal settled even deeper in my chest, and I felt as though I was standing on the edge of a cliff, ready to fall into darkness. The glow of the party lights flickered through the window, casting an eerie shadow that danced along the walls of the dimly lit room. My heart pounded as I stood outside, gathering the courage to step inside the house where I knew Mark and Rachel would be. I hadn't been invited, but I didn't care. I needed answers, and I was ready to confront them both. As I pushed the door open, the sound of laughter and music enveloped me like a thick fog. I scanned the room, my stomach twisting with anxiety. There they were, Mark and Rachel, entwined in a moment that made my heart drop. They were standing close, their heads bent together, sharing secrets that should have never existed between them. The sight of Mark's hand resting lightly on Rachel's back ignited a flame of anger within me. Mark! I called out, my voice sharp and filled with betrayal, cutting through the jovial atmosphere like a knife. Heads turned, and the laughter faded into a hushed murmur. Mark's eyes widened and he stepped back from Rachel, a look of shock painted across his face. Sarah? He stammered, his expression quickly shifting from surprise to an unsettling concoction of guilt and something darker. What are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing. I shot back, my voice trembling with rage. Is this what you call loyalty? Because it sure looks like you've found a new best friend. I gestured toward Rachel, who stood there, her eyes wide and innocent, but I knew better. Wait, Sarah, let's talk about this. Mark started, but I cut him off, refusing to hear any more of his excuses. Talk? About what? The way you've been lying to me? The way you've been sneaking around behind my back? I took a step closer, my heart racing. You think I wouldn't find out? Before Mark could respond, Jake stepped forward, a confident smirk on his face. Let's not forget who the real issue is here, Sarah, he said, his tone casual as if we were discussing the weather. You're making a scene. Stay out of this, Jake. I snapped, my frustration boiling over. But he wasn't finished. Actually, this is very much my business, he said, crossing his arms. You see, Rachel and I have been seeing each other for months now. The words hit me like a slap. I turned to Rachel, who looked momentarily stunned, and then back to Jake. What are you talking about? I demanded, my voice wavering. You're lying. No, I'm not. Jake's smile was infuriatingly calm. Mark knew about it. We've been keeping it a secret from you. Mark's expression shifted, and I caught a glimpse of something darker, a shadow of satisfaction that sent chills down my spine. You knew. I whispered, my voice barely above a breath. You let this happen? Mark shrugged, a nonchalant gesture that felt like a dagger in my heart. It's not what you think, Sarah. I didn't want to hurt you. Not what I think. I screamed, my emotions spilling over. You've been lying to me. How could you do this? The room was silent now, all eyes on us, and I could feel the weight of their judgment pressing down on me. Maybe you should have paid more attention, Jake chimed in, his voice dripping with condescension. It's not our fault you were living in a fantasy. My chest tightened and I felt the world around me start to spin. This isn't happening, I said, shaking my head in disbelief. You're both betraying me, and for what? A cheap thrill. Rachel stepped forward, her expression shifting from shock to defensiveness. You don't understand, Sarah. We have something real. Real. I scoffed, my heart aching as the truth settled in. You both are nothing but a betrayal wrapped in a pretty package. You think this is love? It's selfishness. Jake stepped closer, his smirk fading. You don't know the half of it, do you? Before I could respond, my phone buzzed violently in my pocket. I pulled it out, my hands shaking, and glanced at the screen. An unknown number flashed before me, and my heart raced. I opened the message and the words sent a shiver down my spine. You don't know the half of it. What is it? Mark asked, his voice suddenly tense, but I couldn't even look at him. I felt like I was teetering on the edge of a cliff, and the ground beneath me was crumbling. My world felt like it was unraveling, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning.